we create things twice. We create things first in our mind and then in reality. Welcome to the Gemini lesson. I'm going over thinking in this section. But there is the conscious and the subconscious mind. And so the conscious mind is our regular thinking mind, what we consider like, oh, this is information, I process it, I memorize it, I store it, whatever. The subconscious mind is more of the feeling mind, the heart, and we're going to go into this more in Cancer, but it's important for the thinking mind also because we do things in an automatic sense when we're thinking. So when we actually think and really stop and be like, hey, I'm going to stop and think and go through this process, right? So if you're doing something new, if you're coming up with a new idea, you're stopping every morning for maybe an hour or so, and you're coming up with 20 ideas that are new and different to what you do. And you're hoping that maybe one of them is good, and you do that maybe every weekday, 5 hours a week, take an hour out of your day. And so maybe by the end of the week you have 100 ideas, maybe 3 or 4 of them are good, and you keep on recycling that. And that's kind of like that thinking thing that where we're generating ideas and doing things. Gemini itself is more learning, more elementary understanding, doing kind of basic things. And so when we're talking about that basic things, it's very reactionary. It's something rote that we've memorized and we know. When we're actually thinking, our brain is probably about 300 milliseconds behind. You don't have that time, right? If you're doing, it's the difference between like learning how to ski and like actually skiing, right? If you've skied before, you go down the mountain, no problem. And if you're learning how to ski, you think about how you're going down the mountain and you fall. And that's what we're looking for, is that practiced thinking where we've trained ourselves to actually do the thing. And that's what we're kind of learning in Gemini. As we kind of build that conscious mind and subconscious mind, those two things start to work together, and they start to give us some control of the body, our feelings, and stuff like that. I'm going to start with discussing Castor and Pollux, the Gemini twins, and then we shall kind of go from there. That creation of the twins, right? And both the loud person and the quiet person that are Geminis are really think through things in a lot of ways. One thinks through out loud, and one is pensive and really ruminates over things. I like to think of the twins as being this way. So there is Castor and Pollux, and there's different stories about who they are and what they are. In most stories, they're both twins, and so they're fraternal twins, and they have different fathers. Pollux' father is Zeus or Jupiter, and Castor's father is the king of Sparta. They live their lives, and eventually Castor is going to die, and so Pollux goes to Zeus, hey, I want to live forever with my twin, and Zeus works that thing out where they are put into the sky as Gemini. And so that's the really caring nature of Gemini. They really do care in a lot of ways. And that's reflected also in the tarot. Their tarot card is the Lovers. And the challenge of the Lovers card is that it's kind of like puppy love. It's young love. It hasn't yet realized that there is, you take care of yourself and then you take care of your lover, it's confused. It's like, oh, I can do everything for you. Everything's going to be wonderful. And you're in that sort of like, oh my God, I'm going to lose you. My heart's going to be pulled out and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's kind of like the Lovers in the tarot. It's all these aspects of Gemini is just kind of like the twins egging each other on, right? They're just like, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And it's always kind of pushing it to the next level, pushing it to the next level, pushing it to the next level. It's a very, very masculine energy. I will do anything for you, and then it all falls apart anyway. And so that's kind of the energy that we're working with. I have busted out The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And I'm going to pull out a few parts of chapter 2 here, which are really, really important. And so in this chapter, Joseph Murphy is really drilling home this part of like conscious and subconscious mind. And that you need to process things through the conscious mind in order to get them into the subconscious mind. And so he has some great quotes in here. Like, first of all, it's, if you think good, good will follow. If you think evil, evil will follow. This is the way your mind works. If you think a thought, that thought is going to generate like things. Your life is going to follow upon a path of that thinking, right? When your habitual thinking is harmonious and constructive, you experience perfect health, success, and prosperity. So the key is, if you can train your thinking to be good, your feeling will be good, your actions will be good, your results will be good. These are all things. And a lot of times when we're discussing this in this kind of metaphysical sense, we get into like a circle, and we start talking about like how thoughts become feelings, become actions, become results. And then those results generate more thoughts that become feelings, become actions, and becomes results. And you get this circle going. And there's a lot of ways to consider this circle. The first thing we have to realize is that when we get a feeling that we don't like, we can pause at that point. And one of my mentors called it catch, observe, and release. So you catch the thought, you observe the thought, and then you kind of release it to the ether. Correcting your thoughts isn't necessarily easy or effective, but it is kind of a great spot to start if you haven't done this before. If you keep on catching yourself thinking negative thoughts and you're just like, oh, I'm going to catch, observe, and release that thought and think something else, at some point you will just get overly frustrated, because you have to change your being. It's really being, thinking, feeling, acting, getting results, and then it circles again. There's a lot of like being your essence. You can catch what's going on, you can stop the negative thoughts, you can go for a walk, you can do some push-ups, you can release some steam, you can read a book. Esther Hicks says, like, go to sleep, right? If you can't do anything productive, take a nap. Like, check out. It's that level of like, try to do less harm than you're going to do when you find yourself in that situation, right? You know, you haven't actually changed your subconscious mind yet, but if you catch it in the conscious mind, you still have a lot of control. You can still, not yell at your boss. You can still do kind of a lot of things that are really productive, or at least way more productive than causing problems. And so Murphy writes, the law of your mind is this: you will get a reaction or response from your subconscious mind according to the nature of the thought or idea you hold in the subconscious mind. As you start to drill these thoughts and ideas into your mind, and Joseph Murphy is going to advocate doing autosuggestion, as is Napoleon Hill, as is Julia Cameron, as is and the power of autosuggestion and affirmations is that you just get used to hearing that idea, and maybe you say the idea and you're like, oh no, I would never, or that's not me. But as you hear it more and more, you just acclimatize yourself to that concept. Bob Proctor recommends stating your goal 100 times in the morning and 100 times at night, and really drilling that in. I don't know if that is necessarily the solution. I subscribe more to the notion of Neville Goddard, where once you give that feeling and you release it to God, and God can take care of it, and it's good to come back to that, but you don't need to, like Wallace says, you don't need to repeat it over and over and over and over again. Just the repetition, and why people like Florence Flynn and the people that I mentioned advise that repetition is get used to it, get used to the feel of it, and that's gonna help you. So as soon as your subconscious accepts an idea, it proceeds to put it into effect immediately. And this is another reason why Wallace Wattles in The Science of Getting Rich says don't worry about repeating stuff. If you want to do something, you're going to do it. There's no avoiding it. There's no getting around it. Once you have that thought, it is, if it's a real thought and if it's drilled into your subconscious, it's going. You're not going to avoid it, right? I've wanted to write a book forever, and anytime I'm not doing anything, I am working on the book. And it's not intentional. It's just I had drilled that idea into my head, and it's something that comes up. If I'm in a kind of a workshop where they're like, what are you going to do with your life? They're like, obviously Michael's going to write. And because I've drilled that into my head, and it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'm going to be a novelist or anything like that. And I have done that, but that wasn't what did it. What did it was kind of just making the decision to do it, and then God takes it and goes from there. And so that's what really thinking does. Murphy clarifies, you must remember that these are not two minds, speaking of the subconscious and the subconscious. They are merely two spheres of activity within one mind. Your conscious mind is the reasoning mind. It is the phase of mind which chooses. So your conscious mind chooses, and your subconscious mind just does whatever it's programmed to do. So program it well. We do these things that can seem silly, which may not be so technically correct, but do give us a way to kind of move forward. He writes more, your subconscious mind is like the soil which accepts any kind of seed, good or bad, right? So if you listen to Earl Nightingale, he says that you can plant a nightshade right next to an ear of corn, and they'll both grow up, no problem. Whatever you give the earth, it will return. You have to work the earth, you have to water the earth, but you're not going to get corn if you put in nightshade, and you're not going to get nightshade if you put in corn. We might die, you might not get anything. The thought that you place in your subconscious is what you're going to get. You cannot get anything else. We create things twice. We create things first in our mind and then in reality. And for the most part, there is almost nothing that we just automatically create as humans. Um, right? Maybe you'll eat, maybe you'll have sex and make a kid, maybe there's very, of all the things we do in our day, which is mostly interacting with each other, there's some thought process involved. And it might be kind of automatic, it might not be. But we're always striving to be better, right? And we can go back to the last lesson where we talked about um, variety versus safety, and love versus significance, right? You're always, if you have one, you want the other. That's the crazy eight. If you have significance, you're just like, oh man, I need to be loved. Like, people don't understand me. If you are loved, you're just like, but I don't matter, right? All these people care about me, but I don't matter, right? And you have these reactions, right? And so that's why we grow and we contribute, is because, and we think through, how do we grow? How do we contribute? How do we, are we brainstorming in the morning when we're doing our journaling? Are we saying like, these are 20 things that I'm going to that I could do to better my business. These are 20 things I could do to better, to learn to code better. These are 20 things I could do to connect with other people. These are 20 things I could do to, whatever, right? You're going through gratitude. You're going through generating ideas. You're going through all these things each morning so you can become a better person and really reach out and be like, wow, this is where we are and what we're doing. First principles where we have is, and so Wallace Waters writes, there is no other time but now. Our neurons have a small delay when we're thinking. It's about 300 nanoseconds. It's minute, but it's measurable. Living in the moment is not living without thinking, but living without concern for thought. For no matter how much we think, it cannot affect how we live. We must form habits that go beyond thinking. If you do things automatically, then you will live in the now, because you act in the now. Go over your habits. What are your habits? List your habits out. Know what you do every day. When you wake up in the morning, like, what do you do? What's happening? Why is that happening? Do you brush your teeth? Do you eat? Do you lay in bed and look at your phone? What are your habits? And just briefly think about your habits. Are you okay with having those habits? Are those habits you want to change, right? Add those to that, your journaling, your morning list, that you're thinking about these things. How do you kind of really know what you're going for? And because the idea is that eventually you take responsibility for your thinking, right? Like, the goal of this whole course is to take responsibility for everything. Like, whether it's your responsibility or not, the way you're going to get a lot of power is thinking that you have responsibility and acting as if you have responsibility for everything in your life. So something bad happens, it's your responsibility. Maybe it's not your fault, maybe you didn't do it, but it's your responsibility to fix it to the best of your ability. An amazing book, which I'm always loath to read because it's just so absolutely brutal, was written by Viktor Frankl, and that is Man's Search for Meaning. It always changes my life when I read it, and I'm always not thrilled when I am reading it, just because it's just so absolutely brutal. So most recently, I was talking with my therapist, and he was like, I want you to read Viktor Frankl's Man's First Search for Meaning. And I was like, I really don't want to. And he's just like, just start it. And I was just like, in the back of my mind, I had been thinking that like I should probably read it again. I had gotten a new copy, and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna go through it. And there's a part of the book where he's talking about escaping from camp, right? And he's talking about how the prisoners are debating whether they're going to escape camp or not, because like it's really horrible out there, right? It's horrible inside the camp. They're starving, they're sick, there's tuberculosis, there's horrible, like awful things. But as soon as they leave the camp, like they've got targets on their backs, everybody's trying to kill them. They go from having like thin, very, very thin soup to absolutely nothing. And it's terrifying. Knowing what we know now, like, I guess you just kind of go for it and you do the thing. And this is kind of like a decision that I got to with my last job, is I was just like, well, I'm not adding value anymore. And as I realized that I wasn't adding value anymore, they were not going to make it easy for me to either switch positions or do something different. I was either going to figure out this particular position or basically I was going to figure out this particular position that I was in. And I wasn't doing that. It was kind of difficult. I had put forward some additional ideas, and it just came down to being honest. Like, you have to be honest with yourself. If you failed at something, you have to say like, hey, I failed at it. That's part of thinking, taking responsibility. You have to think to the point of like, do I need to leave this, right? In a concentration camp, the answer is a lot more obvious, and the situation is a lot more dire. By so many times, it goes without statement. Thinking through what those, and they were men that he was discussing, what these men went through in deciding to leave or deciding to stay and help patients or whatever decision they ended up making. That decision was just so much more important than the decision that I was making. And I got to the point where I was like, I can make this decision because it's an easy decision. I may not be happy with the decision that I have to make. I might prefer to get laid off. I might prefer to be moved to a different position. I might prefer to find another job, but those things aren't happening. Once we get honest with ourselves and we really think through something, it makes us so much easier to make that decision and kind of do what we need to do.